Okay, we're recording. I'm going to begin the meeting with our tribal land acknowledgements. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who've lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest regret and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lumbee Nation and Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. My name's Terry Bryant. I'm the director of the Homeless Service Center Department of the Opportunity Council. I'm the chair of this group. It would be great for you all to introduce yourselves in the chat. And if you include your email, we can add you to our mailing list and you'll get future agendas and invitations to meetings. We have a pretty full agenda today. I want to start out by saying just a couple of things. And I know at the Service Center, we've been all following what's been going on in our community. And I just feel so sad about the way things happened at Camp 210 and have anxiety about the camp now at Puget and Fraser. And I just really wish it had gone differently. One bright spot, though, has been how many people in our community are newly engaged and really galvanized for action. The encampment is striking, and it really captures the community's attention and focus on the scope of this issue. Service providers know this is not new, but it's not always really obvious to our community in the way that protest and the ongoing protest has been. And even though Opportunity Council had nothing to do and had no role in the protest or encampment, I just want to recognize and appreciate volunteers, advocates, donors who have great compassion and worked really hard to serve people who really need it. I really believe that we all want the same thing, housing for people without homes. We all believe that housing is a human right. This is timely, actually. Every year, Olympia hosts a Housing and Homeless Advocacy Day. It provides advocates an opportunity to express our priorities face-to-face with lawmakers. This is coming up just next week. Mike Parker and Jasmine Carpenter have been working really hard to organize our effort this year. They've got meetings set up with lawmakers next week. If you want to learn more, I don't know if Mike is here. I believe Jasmine is. You can reach out to Jasmine Carpenter. I'm going to go ahead and type her email in the chat in case she hasn't been able to log on yet. Okay, contact Jasmine if you want to know more about Advocacy Day. I suspect that at least part of the tension in our community right now comes from not understanding our homeless housing system, and I take responsibility for that. Our system is complicated, it's under-resourced, it changes constantly, it's not clear at all to the people working outside of that system, and sometimes not even to our own housing partners or funders. So today we're going to have some presentations that'll give you an overview of the housing system, how coordinated entry fits within that system, and then some short presentations on housing interventions, followed by a Q&A period. I hope today's presentations will make this system more transparent. That's my goal. We're going to hear from Alix at the Homeless Service Center, staff from Lighthouse Mission, Cassidy from Lydia Place, and Michaela from Opportunity Council. The more folks understand the system, the better you can serve clients that we have in common and identify the gaps. And there are gaps. Perhaps more importantly, today's agenda demonstrates part of the work implementing the 2019 strategic plan to end homelessness. In that plan, you can see it on our website, on the county website, and on the city website. But there's evidence-based strategies identified, and the four we're going to talk about today are centralized point of entry, let's coordinated entry, interim housing interventions, rapid rehousing interventions, and permanent supportive housing. Feel free to put your questions in the chat during the presentations. And I think I'm ready to hand it over to Alix, who I probably need to unmute. Where are you, Alix?
I got it for you, Terry.
Thank you. My gosh, we have really good turnout today. That's exciting.
I hope my Kermit hands helped.
They helped Marisa.
Oh, that's good. That's who I was most concerned about.
Do you need to share the screen? Are you able to do so?
Let me see if I have that ability. Dun, 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 dun. It looks like I can. It might ask you for confirmation that I'm allowed to, but
Okay, go for it.
awesome, thanks. Before I get started, hi everybody. I am Alix White. I work at the Homeless Service Center. I am the housing referral specialist, and I specifically deal with people with permanent supportive housing referrals. Give me 1 second. I thought I had my presentation pulled up. I apologize that I do not. So we're going to talk about coordinated entry today. So this training and presentation generally takes about 45 minutes, and I'm going to do my level best to get through it in about 15 for you all. So if I seem to talk especially fast or skip over some of the things you see on the slides, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I'll try to address them if I can.
Alix, you have 30 minutes.
Oh, 30
Does that take
minutes.
some of the pressure off?
Well, yeah, okay, I feel a little better now. I'm still probably gonna talk real fast. There's lots of information to cover. So, coordinated entry is the system for homeless housing intake that we use in Whatcom County. It is a system of prioritization for homeless housing programs, and it's currently considered the best practiced by HUD, which is the Housing and Urban Development Department, which oversees that. Here at the Opportunity Council through the Homeless Service Center is where we administrate coordinated entry for Whatcom County. The manager of that program is Justin Krupa. And then the two housing referral specialists are myself and Chris Pollock. And then our program support specialist is Jasmine Carpenter. So the goals of coordinated entry are many. It is housing first oriented. So housing first is the model that we use that in a very simplified way of saying, the intention of housing first is that people need homes before they can work on anything else in their lives. They need a solid and stable foundation in which to work on any mental health issues they may be facing, physical health issues they may be facing, or substance abuse issues they might be facing. So we try and get people into housing before we try and help them with anything else. Some of the programs we refer to do have certain requirements like sobriety requirements or requirement that the client be working with a mental health professional before they can enter the program. And if that's the case, we do let the client know and we do our best to help them get with those programs so that they can enter the housing. The Housing First model is person and client centered. So we want everything to be client's choice. If there are a number of referrals available, say more than one, and they qualify for all of them, then we'll offer them the choice of which one they would prefer to be referred to. If there's only one available and they decline it for whatever reason, it's completely up to them. That's totally fine. There's no penalty for that. So if they decline a referral, that doesn't mean that they're no longer eligible for services. It doesn't mean that they are somehow out of the running for services in the future. We just thank them and move on to the next person to be referred or see if we can find a better program for that client. Coordinated entry uses fair and equal access by offering multiple entry points that are positioned around the county so that hopefully no matter where our clients are, we can get to them or they can get to us to have intake done to get onto the housing pool. And if they need any kind of accommodation like translators or someone to help them fill out forms or anything along those lines, we can offer those to them as well. We don't impede emergency shelter access through coordinated entry. So if someone is staying at one of the emergency shelters or emergency housing programs around the county, that doesn't interrupt their ability to be housed through coordinated entry in the housing pool. And we do have access points to the housing pool at some of our shelters as well.
Hey, Alix, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're getting a couple messages that are still saying they're only seeing the first slide. So if you've gone forward, I don't know if you froze.
I'm on the goals of coordinated entry slide. Is that what everybody's seeing?
No, we just see the first slide.
Oh, odd. Okay.
You might have to physically move it because sometimes Zoom gets really weird about this stuff.
Does that change it for anyone? Are you still just seeing the first slide? Okay. Let me try closing it down and trying again. 1 second, sorry, y'all. Are you seeing any change now?
No, a link to article on FEMA police apparently is being seen for some. And D. Chapman just made a suggestion. I think you have to change the display setting if you're using two screens. And they're still seeing one slide, it looks like.
Okay, please ignore the sound in the background. That's my very old pug who has no sense of propriety or manners whatsoever. I'm sorry, what was that suggestion? I missed what you said there.
A suggestion to change the display setting if you're using two screens.
To change the display setting.
Oh, Chris just said, or turn one of your monitors off. Kristen, off it.
Okay. Let's see if this helps. 1 second. Sorry, everyone. What are we seeing now? Anything?
We're seeing the first slide.
First slide, okay. Let's see if it will cooperate.
Now we don't see the slide. That's good. Yeah,
All right,
you're doing
great.
it.
So note to self, no two monitors. Okay, so where were we? I already said all of these parts. So inclusive, coordinated entry uses population-specific intakes and assessments. So that means that we have one for individual adults, we have one for veterans, we have one for families with children, and we have one for youth under the age of 18. And we make it as low barrier as possible with as few screenings as possible. And our ultimate goal is to screen people into housing programs, not screen them out of housing programs. Some of the benefits of coordinated entry include a less burden on clients by simplifying access to services and having multiple access points. Again, so no matter where they are, hopefully they can get to us or we can get to them. Using the housing first model, again, provides them an opportunity to be housed even if they have other barriers impacting their housing, like substance abuse or mental health issues. We use it to prioritize clients based on need, and there's a number of assessments that we use to determine that need. We offer exceptions if needed. Some of these are, could be considered like under medical exceptions if the client is facing some chronic, ongoing, or severe medical issues. And coordinated entry has been shown to be quite an improvement on outcomes. So we can offer programs with multiple levels of support for all different kinds of people. We can work together with other service providers for collaborative solutions to offer the most appropriate referrals to our partner agencies. My goal in coordinated entry and permanent supportive housing specifically is to offer people referrals to places where they have the most chance of being successful. And the more information I can gather about a person, the more I can work with them, the more that increases that chance. Access points around Whatcom County for coordinated entry are here at the Opportunity Council through the Community Resource Center. People can call in and do an intake over the phone. Our homeless outreach team or HOT team can do intakes in the field or at hospitals or maybe at jails. And then we also have out by Maple Falls, our East Whatcom Regional Resource Center, which is our satellite office. Northwest Youth Services offers an access point for youth ages 13 to 24. DVSAS offers an access point to their safe shelter guests. There's an access point at Lake Whatcom, one at YWCA, and then through the GRACE and LEAD programs. Briefly, the GRACE program is a collaboration between ourselves and many of the medical service providers around the county for people that are high utilizers of the emergency services. And the LEAD program is a collaboration between ourselves, the folks at GRACE, for people that are high utilizers of the criminal justice system. So housing in Whatcom County can be broken down into the following areas: fair market housing, the housing authority inventories, tax credit buildings, homeless housing programs, and then coordinated entry. Fair market housing, of course, is the housing that's available to the general public. Anyone that can afford to get housing can get housing. But as we all know, Whatcom County has a very low, less than 1% vacancy rate, and it's quite expensive to get and maintain housing in Whatcom County, so it's not an option for the majority of our clients. The housing authorities, Bellingham and Whatcom County, have income-based housing programs through things like Section 8, also called the Housing Choice Voucher, public housing programs, project-based housing, and people can apply for that housing at those respective offices or online. Their properties are affordable properties and are generally scattered buildings, most of which are income and rent restricted. Tax credit buildings are another option we have in Whatcom County. They're kind of a complicated thing, but essentially what they are corporations, businesses, or nonprofit entities can get a tax credit every year to purchase, maintain, and finance rental units for people on various housing programs. Those units are income and rent restricted. Tenants there have annual inspections and assess their recertification. The programs that are supported vary by developer or agency, and the tax credits are how the buildings are financed. And the ongoing rent is paid by the particular tenant's housing program. A little more on tax credit buildings. They're usually comprised of several different reduced type rents all under one roof. Depending on the tax credit, occupancy will require the tenants to fall within the income limits of 30, 60, or 50% of the average median income. And other subsidies that can be used are Section 8, Shelter Plus Care, VASH, which is through the Veterans Administration, HEN, which is Housing and Essential Needs, that's administered by DSHS, and a number of other ones. Sometimes developers or owners will have several units that are of market rate, and they rent to the general public, and that's another way that they help finance the buildings. And 3 examples of nonprofit tax credit buildings we have in town are through the BHA, Mercy House, and Catholic Housing Services. So homeless housing programs, everything on this slide, anybody that stays at any of these programs are eligible to be included in the housing pool. That includes base camp through Lighthouse Mission, of course. Lighthouse Mission's Agape Home, which for those that don't know is a 12 to 18 months emergency shelter for women and children. And then the drop-in center. And I have to update this slide because the drop-in center is now open, as far as I know. And other ones are out on Lummi. We have Lummi Victims of Crime, which is an emergency shelter for Native American women with children or without who have experienced domestic violence or sexual assault. Stepping Stones, which is out on Lummi, which is for Lummi Nation tribal members or their families who are experiencing homelessness. DVSAS has a safe shelter house for domestic violence victims. Northwest Youth Services operates the PAD program, which is an emergency shelter for youth 13 to 17. And kids that are there work with Northwest Youth Services. They don't apply directly to the housing pool because they're not yet 18. But in fact, myself and a couple of members of staff at Northwest Youth Services are working right now to create some sort of bridging so that people that age out of services there can easily get into the housing pool without too much lag time. And then Lake Whatcom Treatment Center also offers an emergency shelter with beds for adults. Some other housing programs, these ones are not, people that stay at these programs are not eligible for the housing pool. Some faith-based programs are New Way Ministries, which is a 6-month transitional program for women and women with children. And Getty Refugee Ministries, which is a faith-based restoration program for women suffering from the effects of sexual exploitation. Clean and sober housing, of course, there's a number of those around Whatcom County. Lake Whatcom Residential and Treatment Center also offers a boarding house, which is a transitional housing situation. And they also offer independent living units, which is primarily what I refer to for permanent supportive housing. And then other permanent housing options are, of course, through the Bellingham Housing Authority, Mercy Housing, or Catholic Housing Services. And then here's us in coordinated entry. This little flow chart sort of shows how it goes. So one of these wonderful, colorful people here find themselves to be homeless. So they access one of our points through the CRC, through the East Whatcom Regional Council, the Homeless Service Center, one of our partner agencies that I've mentioned, or through our HOT team. We do the intake and a SPDAT, which is a vulnerability scoring system. And then the information we get from those two forms helps us determine whether or not they're eligible for the housing pool, or maybe they'll be better served by one of our diversion programs, like our senior or family diversion. If they're not a good fit for the diversion program and they are eligible, then they are entered into the housing pool. And then myself and Chris work with them to refer them to one of our partner agencies. Those include Sun House, Catholic Social Services, who take care of Francis Place, Lydia Place, the Lighthouse Mission, Northwest Youth Services, our various programs at the OC, Lake Whatcom Center, the YWCA, Pioneer Human Services, who administer Citygate, and Family Promise.
Hey, Alex, can I interject here?
Please.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about diversion, which is increasingly considered a best practice. So there are programs that are specific to certain populations and maybe have some financial assistance in them, but diversion really is a service intervention model based on problem-solving conversations and really having, instead of having an intake experience where you're just asking your client or household about all of their barriers and weaknesses and why they became homeless, it's a conversation that explores their strengths and assets and can help identify when people are in trauma and they're using their kind of fight or flight brain to identify some opportunities that maybe they're not able to see on their own. So that actually happens in our CRC or Community Resource Center with every household that presents for services. They may move forward with an application for the housing pool, but all of them receive that diversion, problem-solving, strengths-based conversation. Go ahead, Alex.
Thanks, Terry. So who is eligible for the housing pool? In order to be eligible for the housing pool, a client has to meet the HUD's definition of literal homelessness. And what that means is it means that a person is staying in a place that is not meant for habitation. So some examples are cars, parks, abandoned buildings, out on the street, or in any structure lacking heat, water, or sewage. If someone is staying in an emergency shelter, then they qualify. Or if they're staying in a motel or hotel that is paid for by an agency or church. One caveat to this is if someone is staying in a hotel or motel and they're paying for it out of their own pocket, or that stay is being funded by a family member or a friend, that's considered to be safely sheltered and they're not considered literally homeless. But if they are staying and that stay is funded by a community agency or a church, that's considered emergency shelter, and so they are considered to be homeless. Others might be staying at a hospital or other institution like treatment or prison. They would qualify if they've been there for 90 days or less and they were previously literally homeless. If someone is fleeing domestic violence, and if they are a veteran, they are also eligible if they are at imminent risk of losing their housing within 14 days. Oops, I went backwards. So the income limits for housing programs, we get these guidelines every year. We're still using 2020s. I don't believe we've received 2021s yet. So for single individual households and households with minor children, they fall within the 30% AMI category. So essentially what that means is if you are an individual, then as long as the income that you're bringing in every month is $1,496 or less, you would fall within that income category and be eligible. And then the amounts change depending on the number of people in your household. If you're a household who's fleeing domestic violence, then the 50% AMI would apply to you. And if you are a veteran household, the 60% would. That being said, there are no income limits for veterans that are totally unsheltered, nor is there income limits for unsheltered families with minor children. So next steps on the housing pool. Something that's very, very important to remember, both for our clients and also for our partner agencies, is that the housing pool is not a wait list. It's not a chronological list of one person comes first and the person after them comes next. We use a number of different assessments in communication with both the client and other service providers that they interact with to determine a client's vulnerability and their level of need. When a referral becomes available, that's when we would see who matches up best with that referral and refer them at that time. So that can be frustrating for our clients because they expect that if they've been on the wait list for a period of time, say they have a friend who's also been on the housing pool for a period of time, but maybe less time than they have, or maybe at the same amount of time, and that friend's been housed through a referral, they would expect to be next on the list. But it's important to remember that that's not how the housing pool functions. There's a number of things that are taken into consideration when making a referral. Eligible households with minor children are assigned case management when they enter the housing pool. And then eligible households without minor children, while they're waiting for a referral, they can continue to search for housing on their own. And we ask them to please check in with us every 30 days to stay active in the pool. They can also access our housing lab through the Whatcom Homeless Service Center, which is another way they can search for housing independently. So some examples of minimal intervention programs in coordinated entry would be Sun House, which is up on Chestnut, just up the road from OC. And they serve individuals with mental health disabilities if that individual has case management. They are considered emergency housing, but they are a little bit longer term. Folks can stay there for up to 90 days. And while they're there, they're still eligible to be referred to a permanent program through the housing pool. Family Promise is another partner agency, and they serve households with children, and they're considered emergency housing as well. And so anyone staying with them is still eligible for referral through the housing pool. At the OC, we have deposit assistance, which is for people who are unhoused and have found a place to live, but they need a little help moving in. So it's a one-time assistance with move-in costs. It's not an ongoing subsidy. Anyone who's in the housing pool is eligible. The program is client-led, so that would be a good opportunity for folks to utilize our housing lab so that they can locate, apply for, and be approved for an eligible unit. After they have approval for a unit, then they can apply for deposit assistance. And people that use this are generally individuals who can gain employment or rent a room and pay their rent themselves moving forward. Deposit assistance is based on unit eligibility and fund availability. Clean and sober programs are not eligible for deposit assistance. The unit must pass a habitability check by an OC case manager. Subleases are allowed to use deposit assistance if they have permission from the property owner. And once they've received deposit assistance and they move in, they're considered to be permanently housed and no longer eligible for the housing pool.
Alix, can I jump in again?
Sure.
Sorry.
It's fine.
I just want to add the caveat that this is always subject to funding. There have been times that we have run out of funding and has had to stop. So as soon as we know, we certainly tell clients that whether the funding is available, but it's always a subject to available funding. Thanks, Alix.
Opportunity Council also offers eviction prevention for folks that have received current pay or vacate notices. They can apply at Opportunity Council's Community Resource Center. The appointments are Wednesdays 8 to 3. And there's an eligibility screen that will be done with case managers to determine whether or not it's appropriate. It's a first come, first serve, and there's a limited amount of appointments available weekly. Some of our moderate intervention programs that we work with are various transitional houses, like the YWCA is a good example. They provide some light touch case management there. At the YWCA, of course, they serve women and women with children, and clients that stay there do pay a small program fee. Then there's our rapid rehousing program, which is a short-term rental assistance, about 3 to 6 months. And then with that, folks get short-term case management as well. And that serves households with children, veterans, and people that are eligible for the HEN program, or Housing and Essential Needs. A little bit about HEN. It's a state-funded program through DSHS for people that are unable to work due to a temporary disability, whether that's mental or physical. It lasts for 12 months, and at the end of that time, the client reapplies. DSHS will determine the eligibility of the individual, and then the Opportunity Council will operate the program. And some of the things that are offered to people that are eligible for HEN are essential housing needs like toiletries, hygiene products, cleaning items, that sort of thing. And then if HEN has openings for housing, they'll provide housing to qualifying applicants through coordinated entry and limited case management as well. And then our most intensive intervention program is permanent supportive housing, which is the one that I work in. And that is permanent subsidy and ongoing case management for people. And that serves folks with a high acuity and who are chronically homeless. It serves households both with and without children. However, the majority of this service is accessed by individual adults. And the units available for permanent supportive housing are either project-based through one of our partners or a scattered site. And this is just a list of some of our partner agencies, most of which are probably pretty familiar to everybody. Maybe a couple that y'all wouldn't know would be places like Citygate, which is operated by Pioneer Human Services, and it's supportive housing for chronically homeless folks, veterans, and others who are re-entering from the criminal justice system. Of course, probably most people know about Lydia Place. Lake Whatcom Treatment Center, of course, offers a permanent housing option for folks with that need mental health services. Northwest Youth Services offers their PAD program, which is the emergency housing. And we've already gone over Sun House, I believe. Some other resources to find out more would be us here at the Opportunity Council, BellinghamHousing.org, which is the Bellingham Housing Authority, Housing Search Northwest, Lighthouse Mission, and the very cool Whatcom ABC website. And if all y'all haven't checked that out yet, I highly recommend it. It's the Whatcom Asset Building Coalition, and they have resources there for homeless housing, for budgeting, for food access, for education access. It's kind of a really neat one-stop shop for like all of the resources that are available in Whatcom County. And that pretty much is that. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. Even if you're not a partner provider, even if you're just a member of the public, I'm more than happy to talk to you about coordinated entry and the housing programs that are available. And I won't volunteer Chris, but his name is on this slide. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, Alix. Okay. I was going to ask someone from the mission to talk about emergency shelter, and I don't know who is going to present. So I'm wondering if you can tell me in the chat so I can unmute you.
Oh,
Bridget, yeah.
yay.
Thanks, Bridget.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I've got a few minutes. Is that correct? Okay, great. So at the mission, we have our own sort of continuum of care from beginning to our most intensive services. We have our outreach programs that include our Street Connect program, where staff are going out to many of the camps in town, as well as throughout just the downtown community as well, and doing outreach, building relationships and rapport, and bringing supplies to folks. And then we also have our Shower Connect program, though it has not been running during the pandemic because it relies so heavily on volunteers and local partners for us to locate that in parking lots. But hopefully we are able to start that up again soon. And then from there is the next main point of entry at the mission is base camp, and that's probably our most visible program for many reasons. One of which is it's our largest program. It has anywhere from 130 to 200 people a night staying at base camp. And so last night, for instance, there was 150 people staying there. That means that there's about 50 beds still available at base camp itself on Cornwall. And then there were also we also had the overflow shelter at the old drop-in center open in conjunction with CTK, and that has about 39 beds available. And last night we had about 15 people staying there. So we still had some beds available, and Base Camp is our low barrier night by night shelter. And so it is an easy access shelter for folks experiencing homelessness that need a safe place. We also have folks that come in just in the daytime for any of the 3 meals a day. We serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner at Base Camp. And then we also offer showers and laundry facilities for folks too. And so right now, during the midst of this pandemic, we are screening with a COVID antigen test prior to people entering if they haven't been consistently staying with us for the last couple nights. And so that is really quick though. It only takes about 15 minutes to see the results. And so if you're talking with any clients or working with them about coming in, it's a really quick process, and we can do it any time of the day or throughout the evening. And so there's that. Check-in is at 7 p.m. We also have other service providers that are coming at throughout the week. CMAR Medical Clinic comes on Wednesdays still, and then other providers are still meeting with their clients, whether it's inside Base Camp or in the parking lot or in the courtyard area during the pandemic. During non-pandemic times, most service providers are coming in and doing everything from groups to sessions to case management to meeting with clients to giving medications there. There's lots of variety there, and we are definitely open to partnering with folks in that way if there is of interest as well. We have a extra office at Base Camp for people to utilize to meet with their clients one-on-one if that's needed or desired. And then there's also the opportunity for people to do telehealth in that same room as well. There is one at Base Camp, recently there's been lots of questions about some of our services and whatnot. And anyways, I will not answer all of those questions, but I will say that if you have questions, I am happy to answer them. And so feel free to reach out to me via email, via phone, and I am excited to answer those questions and to engage. A few of the things that we hear questions about often are if pets are allowed at Base Camp, and they are. We have everything from ferrets to iguanas. We've had dogs and cats and a sugar glider. The only things we don't allow at Base Camp are poultry, so chicken. We ask people not to bring in their chickens, and poisonous animals. And so poisonous frogs or snakes or that sort of thing. But otherwise pets are allowed at Base Camp. And then from Base Camp, we also have our 2 recovery programs, Agape for women and women with children, and Ascent for men. And so those are longer term programs that there's an interview process to come in, and they're both clean and sober programs as well. And so that is a bit more of an intensive process. Though we provide light touch case management at Base Camp, in those 2 programs, it's much more in-depth case management and classes that are offered. And people tend to stay for a year or more time in both of those programs before moving on to more permanent housing and options. So yeah, so I think that is the mission in a nutshell. But I'm grateful to those recently who have reached out and asked questions and sought answers to things about the mission, and I would just encourage you to continue to do so, and feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the comment section here. And Terry, is there anything else that you would want me to touch on? Or
Well, there's a question in the chat. Steve Clark is asking, how about unsheltered folks with substance use disorder and or other disorders?
Good question. So we allow people in early stages of recovery or not yet in recovery at Base Camp. And so people that are still in the midst of their use can come in, though we do ask people not to use on site and not to bring in alcohol or drug paraphernalia into Base Camp itself. But people, as long as their behavior is such that it is respectful and appropriate for being in community, living with so many other folks, then they are welcome to come in. And so one of the ways that we describe that to folks is that we base it on behavior, not on whether or not, we don't do UAs, we don't do breathalyzers upon entry at Base Camp or anything like that. It is based on behavior. So if somebody is behaving in such a way that is respectful, they are welcome to continue to stay with us. And so sometimes people, when intoxicated or when using, behave in such a way, and sometimes when not. they behave in such a way that is a detriment to the rest of the community, that makes it unsafe, then in those cases, we would ask that person to leave based on their behavior, not based on just the substance use. And so I just want to throw that out there. We also always provide a pathway back in. So whether that be meeting with a manager and working on a goal plan, and sometimes that goal plan, if it's a continual pattern of certain behavior, we may ask somebody to pursue treatment, and we'd help them get set up with a treatment bed and get them there. And we've driven people to those treatment options and that sort of thing. Or get connected with a case manager or counselor again as well. And so to regain services. Yes. And I see another question about people having to convert to Christianity and praying. So we do not ask people their faith affiliation at check-in. We do not require people to come to chapel services or to attend Bible study or to do any number of those things. We have devotionals that are available to folks, but it is not mandatory. It is completely voluntary in all of our programs. To pray or to engage with faith-related things of that nature. I think that years ago there were times when chapel was more required years back at the mission, and so I think some of that comes from that period of time over 10 years ago when that was required. And then in addition, there are missions in other communities and other states that do require chapel and do require attendance at Bible study in order for somebody to gain entry. And that just isn't the Lighthouse mission here. Not only is that not something that we want to do to require that, but it's also just somewhat impractical for us to try to screen people out with 150 some people at check-in based on faith affiliation as well. If you can imagine, that just sounds very tough. And so we do not do that. If you ever have question about that, I totally understand too the concern there. Some people do have experiences from other missions in other communities where that has happened to them. And so it totally makes sense that some people have that question and that experience elsewhere. But yeah, we'd love to be a place of healing and to reduce any trauma that has come from places of worship. Yes. So does Base Camp track and numbers of how many people are turned away on any given night? So we do keep track in general. Currently, we're not turning people away due to capacity, though, and so we are not currently tracking that. It happens pretty rare that we reach capacity. If people are turned away right now, it is based on behavior. And so recently, for instance, we did have a situation where somebody got into a fight at check-in. They assaulted another person, and they were pretty intoxicated. They were asked to come back the next day to speak with management before re-entry after attacking this other person. Throughout that following night, they continued to try to gain access to services. I think it was 1 a.m., 3 a.m., and onward. And they continued to be pretty intoxicated and belligerent towards staff and really trying to push their way in. And staff continue to reiterate, because of their behavior the night before and the assault, we are requesting that they come back to speak with management the following day. And so that's just an example of the based on behavior and not the capacity and not the time of night and that sort of thing. So, and then how are LGBTQ people welcome to LMM? And so we welcome folks, and Terry, feel free to cut me off here at any point in time, just in case.
I think you're good. A lot of good questions coming in.
Okay. So LGBTQ folks or people that identify that way are definitely welcome at Base Camp or our other programs. We have had folks in every single one of our programs identify as non-binary or transgender, and we have been able to work out with them where they feel most comfortable and safe seeking services. And so our hope and our goal is so that when somebody comes to us and seeks services and mentions that that is how they identify, we want to inform them of all of their options and all of the, what the setup is in each of our programs and what that would look like if they stayed there, so that they can make an informed decision themselves about what is most comfortable to them and in their situation. And then we want to creatively address any safety concerns that they have. We also are committed to making sure that once they are in one of our programs, that there's not bullying or harassment towards them. from any other guests or anyone else on our property. And so if ever that happens, feel free to reach out to us. We definitely want to make sure that that does not happen.
There's a question about outreach to 210 camp.
Oh, I missed that one.
It's from Benush. Hopefully I said your name right. Could you please do outreach to 210 camp and communicate with them since there are so many allegations?
Yeah, so that's really tough. There was a time when we were near Camp 210. Some of our staff and volunteers were around Camp 210 when it was closer to City Hall, when it was over that direction. And we were actually told by some of the people that seemed to be running it, some of the organizers, that we were not welcome there as the Lighthouse mission. And so that is why we have not been going to Camp 210. It was said in a fairly hostile manner, and we don't feel comfortable sending our staff into that. And so if there was an invitation that specifically came from the organizers, then there is the potential that that could change, and we could come up with a safe plan of how we can go about doing that. But yeah, thank you for asking that as well. Is there no entry between 3 and 7 a.m.? So we do have entry between 3 and 7 a.m. Again, it's based on behavior. And so there was a situation this last weekend that I already mentioned that it was based on behavior that the person was not allowed in at 3 a.m. It was not based on the time of night. We do check-ins for beds up until 4:30 a.m. And then we passed between 4:30 and 7. If the weather is bad, we continue to let folks in and just to be in the lobby area to stay warm and to get out of the cold and the weather. But we don't check folks into a bed between 4:30 and 6 because we're waking people up at 6. And so it ends up being pretty disruptive to check somebody into a bed and then wake them up really soon after that, because by the time we get bedding and get them assigned to a bed and all of those steps, it's a bit tough. And so but they are still able to come into the lobby area as long as the lobby's not packed already, which it usually is not. So yeah, thank you for that. There is why are some clients turned away due to mental health if there are no physical or violent escalations? So I don't know if that's coming from a specific situation, but we really try to focus in on the behavior piece. And so we have folks that are dealing with any number of behavioral health diagnoses at base camp. And some of our community partners here know some of those folks are intimately involved in providing continued care for them. But there should not be somebody turned away just because of a behavioral health diagnosis. Prior to entry at base camp, we also don't ask somebody if they have a diagnosis of a behavioral health concern. And so there's not a screening out based on that either. It really is based on the behavior of somebody. And so if there's a specific situation or person that Anna, Shreve, if you are wanting to know about, feel free to shoot me an email and we can connect more and see if that person can regain entry in some way, or if there's if there's some miscommunication on our end about something. So yes.
Bridget, thanks so much for being here and taking questions and talking about base camp and the other programs. I want to just mention briefly before we move on that there's other emergency shelters within our system. Sun House is a 9-bed shelter for people with mental health diagnoses who are very vulnerable. And DVSAS operates a safe shelter for people who are fleeing domestic violence. And Family Promise is a shelter for families who are experiencing homelessness as well. So there's other smaller emergency shelters in our system as well. The next intervention that we're going to talk about is rapid rehousing. And what that means, it's a time-limited subsidy. It means that you go into a program, you probably have a lease in your own name, but you're getting some help with rent for a limited period of time until you can achieve independence and no longer need the subsidy. There's lots of rapid rehousing in our system. A lot of it is reserved for families with children. We also have programming for rapid rehousing. I would actually consider HEN rapid rehousing. That's a time-limited intervention with people who have a temporary disability as determined by DSHS, so they can get temporary case management and housing subsidy. And another form of rapid rehousing is our veterans program. So veterans can apply to coordinated entry and be referred to a veterans program for rapid rehousing as well. And on that topic, Cassidy has agreed to talk to us a bit about what rapid rehousing is like. Thank you so much, Cassidy, for doing this. I appreciate it. And again, please feel free to put your questions in the chat and I'll try to catch them all, make sure we route them right.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. My name is Cassidy. I use they, them pronouns, and I work at Lydia Place. So the majority of my experience working in rapid rehousing is with families with children. But like Terry said, there's lots of rapid rehousing programs that serves lots of other demographics. Rapid rehousing is a short-term rental assistance program that helps folks with move-in costs and then offers sort of a short-term rental subsidy for folks in intensive case management while they enter into a program. And the goal of this program is again, that housing first model to help people find housing as quickly as possible and then increase their self-sufficiency and help them to stay housed. And so they can stay in that permanent housing. It's offered without a lot of those preconditions that some other programs have, like employment or income, absence of criminal history or sobriety, and then they can enter into housing as soon as possible and then work on getting connected to resources and services to tailor the needs of a particular person or household so that they can gain that self-sufficiency. Rental subsidies in this program typically last anywhere from 3 to 6 months or 6 to 12 months and can be extended on a case-by-case basis based on family need and or what is available in funding pools for families or for individuals with the big goal of the program being that clients can afford full rent on their own by the end of the program. So they might enter in paying a really small portion of rent. Maybe they have little or no income. And then throughout the program, the goal would be that the family is able to increase their income in some way to afford full rent, whether it's employment or gaining access to other sources of money like Social Security or disability income or something like that to be able to afford the entire rent. During all the time that they are receiving a subsidy, they are getting intensive case management to help support them on working on goals for their family and maintaining their housing, financial goals, and then what other goals might be identified by the family. Rapid rehousing units are not set-asides in a building in the way that some permanent supportive housing are. They're usually based on partnerships with property managers who are renting units in our community to everybody. So they're competing with anyone who might be applying for a spot in a rental in our community. So places like Windermere and Sunrise and private landlords are places that our clients in the rapid rehousing programs are applying to and coming to. So it's really important for us as case managers and programs to be building those relationships with property managers so that they are willing to work with our clients and willing to hear out some situations where people might have complicated rental histories. I don't have data for 2020 yet because it didn't come out, but in 2019, Whatcom County served 517 households in rapid rehousing and averaged an 80% success rate in those households being able to maintain their permanent housing. So it is a really successful program in getting people housed very quickly and then having people be able to maintain their housing after the program, leaves. And research demonstrates that those who receive rapid rehousing allowance are homeless for shorter periods of time than those who are assisted in interventions like emergency shelter or transitional housing. And it's also one of the least expensive homeless interventions. And funding rapid rehousing allows us to provide permanent housing solutions to more households at a lesser cost than it would be in funding things like emergency and transitional shelters that also are very much needed in our community as well. But we know that it is a very cost-effective model for helping house folks and get them into housing that they are able to stay in then after the program as well.
Thanks, Cassidy.
Sweet, yeah.
Anybody have questions for Cassidy? Put them in the chat. I got a question. This is specific to Lydia Place. Can you talk a little bit about the additional supports that Lydia Place has developed to help families stabilize?
Yeah, so at Lydia Place, we have kind of a wraparound model for support for our families. So we offer mental health support that are eligible to any of our clients. So these are optional programs, so lots of families choose to opt out of them, but they are offered to every single one of our clients when they reach that point of housing entry. They are additionally offered at intake as well, but oftentimes we find that when families are searching for housing, engaging with services like mental health are just maybe not their priority. But we have mental health services to help people maintain housing and work on any other mental health goals they have. And then we also have a parent support program. So we have family support specialists who work with parents. And this program our program specifically targets families with kiddos 5 and under, but does work with parents of all ages as well to help get them like kindergarten ready and be working on parenting alongside maintaining housing goals as well. So we kind of have that wraparound support of a housing case manager who's really going to be focusing on housing and finances and goals related to increasing income, potentially employment, potentially education, and domains like that. And then you might have a family support specialist supporting a family. And really their whole goal and focus is kiddos and how parent and kiddos can communicate and meet each other, and parents can help to meet their kiddos' needs. And then you have mental health, and their whole support is to maintain the mental health of adults and children. So we can serve both adults and children in our mental health program as well.
That's awesome, Cassidy. Thank you. I want to mention also the YWCA, which is transitional. I don't want to skip over that mode of intervention, but it is also a time-limited intervention, and the Y is for single women, and it's communal living. If you have questions about the why, I'll bet you Kirsten could help us out with some answers if you put your questions in the chat. Okay, there's a question about the 80% success rate. Ashley, if you could take a peek there. Aaron's asking over what time frame is 80%? Were they able to remain in housing for 12 months, for example, or is that a number mean 80% of those referred sign a lease?
I do not know. That's off the
I can unmute Ashley. There.
Hi, Erin. I think that the report card from HMAS, which is the data that we have available to us, is exits to permanent housing. So that would be like at time of exit. I don't think the report card, at least that's available to us, captures how much after. What we would need to look at, what we would need to do to look at that probably would be looking at who comes back into the system. So, Terry, I don't know if there's, do we regularly pull data on who's coming back around? Because I know typically if folks, sorry, I got distracted for a second with this little kiddo. Typically, if folks don't re-enter the system, that's kind of the measure of success, right? As far as HMAS and our community's ability to monitor data and outcomes.
I'm going to say yes, no, and then I'm going to say something shocking. Are you ready for this, Ashley? So the reason it's hard for us to answer these questions is because the people applying for services go into this database, and then people enrolling in services go into this database, and they're not talking. So it takes a lot of data manipulation to answer those questions, and weirdly, a long amount of time. So this is my proposition. Jasmine is probably going to want to kill me. I think we should have a program in coordinated entry where everyone in the pool goes into in parallel, and that way the same HMS ID is, we can track how many times they go into coordinated entry over time and how long it takes them to go into a program. So that's the shocking thing that I said. It's probably really jargony for most of you. I'm sorry, and it's news to my staff.
Sorry. I mean, I think if there's any lesson we've learned over the last few weeks is that we need to do a better job looking at this data and talking about this data, and so, you know, I support those efforts.
I'm in full agreement.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Cassidy or Ashley from Lydia Place, or we move on to our next speaker? Okay.
I'll just
cool.
add really fast.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Sorry.
No,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to add really fast. So Cassidy talked a bit about our wraparound model, and that really came out of our wanting to do not just the homeless housing work, but also the prevention work, and getting at mitigating those adverse childhood experiences for the kiddos in our programming. You know, we've served, Lydia Place has been around long enough now that we're serving adults that were kids in our programming 30 years ago. And so our kind of resolution from that is to end that generational cycle. So that's really the work that we're trying to do with the wraparound model.
Thanks, Ashley. That's great. Okay, Michaela, thanks for being here. So the next intervention we're going to discuss is permanent supportive housing. And we're pretty lucky in that our community has invested in quite a lot of it. We have two different models. One is project-based, so that is a building of permanent supportive housing. And the other model would be scattered site, where you're renting an apartment in some building and your neighbor might be a client of ours and you have no idea. So we have both of those models in our community. And Michaela works in two of them, which is Dorothy Place and 22 North. Dorothy Place is an Opportunity Council property, and 22 North is too, but it's in partnership with Northwest Youth Services. So half the units are youth aged 18 to 24, and the other are over the age of 24. I don't remember what else I was going to say about that. Oh, yes, I do. The thing I was going to say about permanent supportive housing is that even though our community has invested quite a lot, it can feel like there's not a lot of movement for people going into those. And the reason is it's permanent. Someone has to leave their unit to make opportunity for someone to go into their unit. That doesn't mean it's not happening. Referrals are being made all the time, but it's slow. And you know what? All the referrals from our system are slow. There's always a wait. We're waiting for someone to leave the program for someone else to come in. So without more resources in this system, we kind of move at this pace. That's also inhibited by market costs. Cassidy talked about how there's people have barriers. Maybe they have an eviction. Maybe they owe some money or have had damages. All of those things are mitigated by the skilled case managers in our system and their relationships with landlords to convince them to rent. So if you think about how hard it is, just as an aside, you know, I have a 25-year-old who's renting her first apartment. It's really hard for her to get approved. If she had all those barriers to come with, it would be even harder. So it's very, very challenging to find the units and the landlords that will rent to folks, even in those scattered site apartments. Okay, and now I'm gonna unmute Michaela and just shut up and let you talk about your expertise. Thanks, Michaela.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, thanks for the intro, Terry. I'm Michaela, and I oversee the day-to-day operations at 22 North and Dorothy Place, which are in Bellingham. And so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about permanent supportive housing. And I think we've kind of touched on it a few times throughout this conversation, so you got a little bit of a background. But so permanent supportive housing, we have 40 units at 22 North and 20 at Dorothy Place. Dorothy Place serves families and individuals that are survivors of domestic violence, and 22 North is around 40 units, and like Terry said, we have youth and adults from many different programs. Everyone at both programs has experienced 12 months of homelessness, either straight or over the course of 3 years. And everyone is living with a physical or mental disability. So those are some of the main criteria to enter those programs, and all of the referrals we get for those programs come from Alix from the housing pool. So there's a big process that happens before we see the folks that enter the programs here. But essentially, once they do enter, they pay around 30% of their income. So if somebody has zero income, they don't pay rent. If they're getting SSI, they just pay 30% of that portion. And sometimes if they have multiple different resources or funding sources, we just put that all together and take 30%. That includes utilities. So at 22 North, we have all studios, and at Dorothy Place, we have up to 2-bedroom units here, 1-bedroom and studios as well. We're operating under the Housing First model, so we don't require sobriety. People come here, usually coming straight out of homelessness. So we're just trying to meet them where they're at and over time build that trust that they're willing to talk to us about their needs and we can start supporting and empowering them on the goals that they want to accomplish. Like Terry said, it is permanent. So as long as folks are paying their rent and abiding by their lease, we are just housing them as long as they want to be here. If folks decide that they want to move, we have case managers for every individual in each building, so they can work with their case manager, connect with the subsidy that they're using for their apartment, and potentially look at moving with that subsidy depending on what it is. We have lots of different subsidies here that help pay the rest of people's rent, the rest of that. You know, they pay 30% and then whatever else that is. So, and like I mentioned, they are screened through the main office at Opportunity Council or different points of entry. And we use that tool. The people who are scoring the highest on that tool are the folks that we're seeing here. I feel like I'm missing some stuff. So we also use the harm reduction model. So we're not forcing folks to stop using. We're not trying to tell people to live a different life than they're living. We're trying to learn how they've been living their life, what's working, what isn't, where they want to be, and just find the safest route possible and things that we actually think are feasible. We don't want to set unrealistic goals for folks. So that is kind of, I would say, the day-to-day and the basics of permanent supportive housing.
I don't see any questions yet. Be sure and put them in the chat if you've got questions for Michaela. The other projects in our system are City Gate, and that's Pioneer Human Services, and I think I saw Pam and Rachel log on. They work in that program. And Francis Place, which is right across the street from Opportunity Council, and that's run by Catholic Community Services. And I think I saw Brady and Steve jump on, but I'm not sure. There's a lot of people in this meeting. It's great. I don't see any questions. I'm going to ask a question. Can you talk a little bit about the difference of intensity of case management between, say, a rapid rehousing model and permanent supportive housing?
Yeah, so in our programs, our permanent supportive housing programs, the case management is much more intensive. The case managers' offices are on site. So in both buildings, the offices are on the bottom floor and then everyone's apartments are up top. It is optional to, you can opt out of case management if a client didn't want to engage, that's their choice. But I would say more so that we have a higher demand for case management than we do folks opting out. So I would say, you know, we see pretty much everyone multiple times a week. We have transportation options. So we have vehicles we can transport clients to medical appointments. We work with lots of different groups to connect them to, say they want to start into support group, they want to look at getting sober, they, you know, want to invest in a hobby that they really care about. Their case manager that is on site here is pretty much their point person, usually the head of their care team. So if you have folks that are staying in these programs, you probably talk to their case manager and they're trying to coordinate as many services as possible for that person. So pretty heavy involvement, I would say, for everyone staying at those two facilities.
Thanks, Michaela. Barbara Johnson-Venna, one of our funders at the county, shares that that our PSH, permanent supportive housing programs, have very high retention rates. And then Paul Schisler has a question. How many supportive homes does Whatcom County need, and what fraction will be in an apartment building like Francis Place? That's a really good question. We always have more need than we have units. And I'm going to rely on Alix for this answer, just in case. But when I was doing, I feel like we had any time between 100 and 150 people, individuals who were eligible for permanent supportive housing and awaiting an opportunity. And that's a lot. I'm really excited about Biden's housing plan. If you guys haven't checked that out, he is suggesting, let's see if it happens, that Section 8 become fully funded, and so that anyone needing a voucher and qualifying could get one and use it. That would really help us with people in the middle of the vulnerability spectrum. People who are not needing a lot of support, those are the folks who do well with that deposit assistance that Alix was talking about. The people who need the very most support, those are the people who need that permanent subsidy. But there's a whole gap of people in the middle that aren't veterans, that aren't HEN eligible, and don't have children. So what happens in our community is they don't get served until eventually, guess what? They become chronic. They suffer trauma while they're waiting for an opportunity. So our system is creating this kind of cycle and producing people that are eligible for permanent supportive housing. I would really like to see that trend change. It feels immoral to me as a human being, I guess, that we're waiting for people to suffer so much trauma before they can be helped. And even when they do, they have this enormous weight. So I think Section 8 vouchers would be a really great way to alleviate that. I know that committees in Congress are forming right now on this issue. Write your Congress people if you agree with me. Alix, I forget what I asked you to talk about, but here, I'll ask you to unmute.
I can confirm that on my I have a very large and complicated Excel spreadsheet that I use to track all of our folks that are eligible for permanent supportive housing. And as it stands right now, a rough estimate of that number of people is somewhere around 263 people that are in the housing pool that are eligible for PSH. So we definitely have more need than we have units. So the answer to your question, Paul, is as many as possible.
I want to add something to that too. We've been in the process in the past year of changing the way we assess vulnerability. And in this context, vulnerability doesn't mean what your housing needs are, what your medical needs are. It doesn't mean that. It means how likely are you to die if you're left outside? And those are the folks we're going for, right? We're going for the people who are at most risk, and we don't catch them all. It's painful. The tool we've been using is called the 2.0, whatever. It's just a surface level screening, and it has problems. It doesn't capture everything that makes someone at risk. And it has problems with racial equity. We've seen that from building changes studies. So what we've been endeavoring to do is change to a more intensive assessment. This takes a long time. But to that end, if you are working with someone that you feel has situations that you feel would contribute to their vulnerability, call Alix. Well, if they're chronically homeless, we'll look at them through that deeper assessment lens, because we don't want people to fall through the cracks, even though we know we can't serve everyone. Any other questions? No? I hope my lip isn't looking like I feel like it's a golf ball on my mouth right now, so I'm really sorry. It is swelling up. Okay, we're going to move on. Next topic is steering committee nominations and updated charter. Barbara worked really hard on updating our charter. It hadn't been changed since 2012. So thank you for that hard work. We had a subcommittee from our steering committee to review that and come to an agreement on it. And I'm working with OC right now to get that posted on our website so anyone can look at it and say, what the heck is the coalition for? And what are we doing? And how do we do it? So that's one goal I have. We had a lot of vacancies in the last year that have now been filled, so I want to welcome some new members. Katie Stevens from Unity Care Northwest has joined steering. Tommy McAuliffe, I noticed he had to jump off. He works on the LEAD program. Paula Mathiasi from Northwest Youth Services. Mike Parker, Opportunity Council, former chair. He's representing housing and healthcare integration. Lorena Shaw, she's also Opportunity Council. She represents employment services. And we still have some openings I just want to mention really quick before we move on. Mental health representation, substance use disorder representation, Native American representation, someone from the business community, veteran representation, higher education, and we're always looking for people with lived experience to participate and share their experience and expertise. But sometimes that's challenging to do because we do not want to re-traumatize people or stress people who are currently experiencing crisis. So if you're working with clients who you feel would have the capacity to participate, that'd be helpful. The steering committee meets every other month, just like the coalition. And then there's an additional ask that those folks also assist us in the governing body that we are assembling for coordinated entry. Okay, that's all I have about that. Any questions about that? If you want to nominate somebody, ask the person first and then let us know. Okay, next item is an update from the city of Bellingham. Samia, I'm gonna find you so I can unmute you. Yes. Thanks, Samia.
Thanks, Terry. Hi, everyone. Great to see this big group here. I work in the Housing and Services program for the city. We're under community development. I really appreciate your comments, Terry, at the beginning of the meeting about Camp 210 and everything that's been going on. I'm not going to talk about that. That's not my role. With the city, I'm primarily work on funding contracts with our partner agencies who do a lot of the things that have been spoken about throughout this whole meeting, provide permanent supportive housing solutions, provide rapid rehousing programs, provide diversion programs, and some shelter services as well. So like the county, the city helps to fund a lot of those agencies that participate in the coordinated entry system with referrals through the Homeless Service Center. And we just really appreciate the work of all of you in the community who are doing this on a day-to-day basis. I wanted to say that our funding comes both from the generosity of the folks that live in Bellingham through the housing levy, as well as through the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development that's been mentioned a couple times on this meeting. And then a little bit of city general funds also go into the funding that we're able to disperse to community agencies. And the two biggest areas that we fund are housing development, and then the other one are housing services and other kinds of social services. A few times earlier in this meeting, folks have mentioned how challenging it is to have referrals into programs and units in our community. A big priority for the city and for the folks in Bellingham that have supported the housing levy is to build more units, just to get more units on the ground for folks. And so right now, we have about 7 million at play in the community right now to develop over 200 more units that should be completed in the next year or so. These are not new applications to the city. These are things that have been funded in the past, but it often takes 3 to 5 years for one single development to get on the ground, like what we've been talking about, 22 North, Francis Place, those kinds of developments. It's just an intense amount of work. And then at the end of the day, we have, 40 units, 80 units, whatever it is, it just never feels like enough. But those units mean the world, to the people who are living there. And I encourage you, the city has a website. It's just cob.org/state of housing. And if you scroll down on that page, you can see some stories of folks who have been served through these programs over the past few years. And it's just useful to kind of hear things from their perspective. But our application round closed on January 25th. And so we did get a lot of applications in from agencies. We have about 7.5 million requested for additional development. Another 197 units could be built if we're able to fund all of those that just applied this January. And then we have over 2 million in applications for housing services and social services, which is about double what we've typically been able to fund. So we're gonna do our best to review those. That process takes a long time because the city utilizes outside review committees, and then ultimately the mayor and city council weigh in, and then HUD, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, also has to approve our annual action plan for how we're going to spend their funds. So it takes between now and June for that process to be completed. And I think that's all I'm going to say, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Samia. Next thing is an update from the county. And Barbara, I know you told me to put your name there, and I might have left Chris's on it by mistake. So who wants to do it? Sorry. Barbara. Okay, cool.
Okay,
I hear you.
now? All right. So my name is Barbara Johnson-Venna, and Chris directly below me. Both Chris and I are housing specialists for the county. We do very similar work to what Samia described as far as homeless housing programs. So we do have a county budget for housing programs. And I'm going to share a little bit of information about that with you right now. So this year, we have a total of $13 million in our housing budget to distribute, which is a record breaker. And the main reason for that huge influx of funding is related to the some new funding through the U.S. Treasury Department for rental assistance. And that is for almost $7 million coming into Whatcom County. So that is something that is really to celebrate, I would say. And the county will be contracting these funds out to the Opportunity Council, who will be distributing the payments for those eligible. And this can provide rental assistance for up to 12 months. It can pay rent up to 3 months in advance, and people can reapply for additional assistance. It can only pay forward rent unless assistance is also provided to reduce rental arrears if a tenant owes back rent. And landlords and property owners are allowed to help tenants in applying for assistance, or they can also apply on the tenant's behalf. So that's something that is a little bit different with this round of rental assistance compared with the last. Partial payments are allowable if the household can cover the remainder of the rent, and then assistance is only allowed for households whose primary residence and is only within Whatcom County. As far as the rest of our budget is about $6 million, $7 million, $6 million, sorry. And that also, even regardless of the Treasury funds that have been added to our budget, that is still the highest budget I've seen in the 5.5 years since I started working for the county. So we put that funding out into contracts. The primary interventions that we fund include case management, permanent supportive housing, rental assistance, coordinated entry, increased shelter capacity for this year, and also maintaining current support for our smaller shelters that Terry referred to, such as Sun House, the WCCEH, and others. And then we also have funded shelter through motel stays. So, and that's primarily for families with children. So the strategies that I mentioned are in our local plan to end homelessness. And I'm going to, I think I'll add that to the chat box when I'm finished here so you all can see where to access that plan. You know, we're talking about a lot of funding, and at the same time, I want to acknowledge that this falls short. You know, we're not able to help a large segment of people in our community. And that's not, you know, that's nothing to celebrate at all. So until we're able to do that, you know, I think we try to use this funding as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Our partners that we distribute this funding to are just amazing at making this funding go as far as possible. And so I credit them with the way that they manage our funding and the, you know, the outcomes they're able to produce. So with that, thank you so much for, I'm really surprised and happy to see so many people here today. And I really appreciate the excellent presentation by the Homeless Service Center. Thank you, everyone. Any questions?
There's one here that I was kind of typing to answer, but I'm just going to use it with say it with my mouth. Megan H had a question: is there a way to access these services for clients who are not homeless? Folks who are unable to pay their rent right now may be able to get some rental assistance through Opportunity Council or Law Advocates. And isn't the other recipient Salvation Army, Barbara? Are they still assisting folks?
I think, I'm not sure if Salvation Army will be with the new funding. And Beck says no.
No, okay, thanks, Ann. So if you are behind on rent, there's an eviction moratorium. So if someone's trying to evict you because you're behind on rent, I strongly advise you to get in touch with Law Advocates. But if you can't pay your rent, please call Opportunity Council to get an appointment. There's a set amount every month. Call them on the first business day, leave a message, they call back in order. Don't leave a message before 8 a.m., no matter how tempting that is. So you can do that. If you're looking for other types of supports for people who are not experiencing homelessness, call our Community Resource Center. They're experts in how to connect with resources. That's what they do all day, every day. And if you can't get a hold of someone, you want to call Alix, do you want to call Chris or Jasmine, please do. The Homeless Service Center is 360-255-2091, and you can get to really any of us from that page. And we're glad to brainstorm with you if you have someone who needs assistance. We're pretty familiar with community resources too, and I almost left out HOT. HOT also are experts in resources. Let's see, was there another question here? Okay, Opportunity Council is the primary rental assistance agency for those eviction prevention dollars. Maurice has put our number in the chat. Erin says the State Attorney General's office can also help with illegal evictions right now. So that is helpful to know. And Marisa tried to put the HOTS phone number in, but didn't. Marisa, that's funny. Okay. So we're a little bit over time, and I want to respect that if you need to go, but I also want to leave time at the end for updates or topics that anyone would like to share. And now I'm going to look really dumb while I figure out how to unmute everybody. Ask all to unmute. Okay. So if anyone would like to share anything that we haven't touched on today, now is your time. Binush has in the chat, I'd like to recommend that all agencies look at Built to Zero at community.solutions. And I've been looking at that website myself. Some communities that have achieved functional zero. It appears to me for special populations. So functional zero for veterans or chronically homeless folks. And what that means is that your community has a capacity to take someone who's becoming homeless in that demographic and serve them. No, wait, that's functional zero. It's not 0-0, right? Because our economy is disproportionate. or incomes to expenses to live, that still exists. But functional zero is the term for having the capacity to serve everyone who needs it in programs. And we're not there yet, though we almost got there with families about 2.5 years ago, and I have a lot of faith we could get there again. And Barbara says, county funding sources have specific requirements on which type of interventions that can be funded. Thanks, Barbara, that's true. I'm gonna just shut up and stop talking so y'all can unmute if you like and share any updates you may have. Oh, Summer points out that the point in time count concludes tomorrow. I didn't even talk about that. I'm so sorry. We're counting people. Really quick, HUD has said that unsheltered populations are an optional population to count this year due to the pandemic. And I mean, I can't even tell you what Teresa said when I brought this up. She was like, what? We are counting. And so HUD's been out there counting folks. We have a little bit of a grace period in the time in which we can count, I think because of the pandemic. And so that's what HUD's been doing last week, this week, and is still going through tomorrow. So if you know anyone who's unsheltered needs counted, call HUD, call the service center. We can do a survey over the phone.
Okay. All right.
If there's nothing else, then I thank you all so much for being here. A reminder, if you want to get on our lists for emails and agendas, and also for advocacy opportunities, be sure and put your email in the chat so we can add you. I'll give a couple minutes for that so you can type your email. I don't want to end the meeting before you can do that. Anush is asking about the CDC guidelines about moving encampments, and yes, the answer to that question is yes. Marcus, are you able to unmute? Here, individually, I'll do it.
Great. Looks like I got it. Hey, thanks. I'm actually traveling right now. We just got done dropping off some food to Swift Haven, and I just wanted this is my first time with this meeting. I'm not sure how the structure goes. I might have raised my hand earlier. I just want to say that I only caught parts of this as I'm traveling. I had to go to a doctor's appointment and everything else. But I want to say that I can tell you that I am aware that the HOT team came to Camp 210 one time, brought some PPE, brought some masks, posed for a picture and left. And I've never seen HOT team down there again. And as far as what I came in on Bridget talking about how they had a team chased out. I don't know. I contacted the mission, both Bridget and Hans, and had a back and forth with both of them in the first weeks of the encampment. And if either one of them had alluded to me even a little bit that they were going to send any help at all, I certainly would have helped to facilitate that. And I considered myself a point of contact for that since.
Oh, you got muted again. Here.
I had that going. So sorry about my phone just rang. We did have that communication going, so I don't know where that comes from, but I just want to make the record clear. There were no services present. Compass Health sent somebody and to connect with a couple of their clients, and I never saw anybody else. So if you meant to be seen or you didn't announce yourself, then if you felt like you got chased off, I'm sorry to hear that, but nobody reached out to me to let me know that, and you all knew that I was trying, and I just want to be clear about that. You all knew that I was trying to make those connections. I begged. So thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Marcus. Any other updates or topics before we adjourn? Marisa, can you speak to Marcus's comment?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute myself and it wasn't working out very well. So Marcus, HOT did enter the encampments several times, and we were met with some pretty serious threats. We did drop off PPE. If a picture was taken, I have no knowledge of that. And also, if a picture is taken, none of that will be shared out unless a person that is involved in the picture gives us verbal consent to do so. Other than that, we have really gone out of our way to take the time to work with a good number of the advocates there. I have dealt with giving some 101 type lessons as to how to be a good advocate. We've talked about planning. I've made a couple plans with some of the people at the camp, and it didn't go over too well. I don't really know the stuff behind it, but I continued trying and still continue to keep in touch with quite a few people that are advocates of the former encampment and where everyone is now. So as far as HOT is concerned, we are more than willing to serve anybody we run into. However, I can tell you right now, respectfully, as a supervisor for my team, I'm not going to put them in an unsafe situation. And when we encounter those unsafe situations, it's not always in our best interest to reach out to multiple parties to discuss what's going on, just because sometimes there's some really sensitive information involved with clients. And without those releases, we're not going to be able to share. So it has been a lot of work. There's still collaborations going on behind, I guess, what you would say the public eye. There's lots of texts and lots of phone calls going on. So we've also been able to work on a collaboration to be able to get the folks at Civic Field counted for our point in time count. And we continue to move forward with everything else that we're trying to do to support people. So Marcus, if you have any questions, you want to have a chat, whatever the case is, you can give me a call on my cell. I'm more than willing to have a conversation and discuss whatever you feel you need to.
Like, give a little context to what HOT does in encampments. In the last quarter of 2020, they entered 362 active camps. So they are out there every day, going into camps and rendering assistance. Anything else before we adjourn? Well, I appreciate everybody staying 10 minutes late. Thank you so much for being here. Hope to see you in 2 months. First Thursday of the month, 3:30. Have a great day, guys. Bye.